Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you all like it, please like and subscribe, and hope you all enjoy it. Have a great rest of the day.
Charging for stamps. Yeah.
Take care. Halt. Draw your swords. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Let's try it again. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Cowpens National Battlefield. Yeah, very good. Thank you for coming out. We're so excited to be able to talk to you and show you what we've got to offer today at the park. Before you see displayed out members of the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons, which is a reenactment unit that goes all over the eastern seaboard to reenact the Revolutionary War. And arrayed amongst the line here, we've got several different people dressed as different regiments that participated here at the Battle of Cowpens, January of 1781. Now, a dragoon itself is a mounted soldier. As you can see, these horses behind us are essential to this kind of service. It allows you to act as reconnaissance, surveillance, scouts, communications, but also as a heavy shock troop when need be. Here at the Battle of Cowpens, there were several essential cavalry charges that warded off catastrophe for the American side, or the rebel side that was here fighting in the battle. Now, we're going to open up for questions in a little bit, but we're going to go over some of the few details we have about who these troopers are and what they're carrying, and why does that matter as we sit here at Cowpens National Battlefield. Myself and the other men that are dressed like me represent that 3rd Regiment of Light Dragoons, a regiment raised mostly out of Virginia in the winter of 1777. See service up in the Northern Campaign up through Pennsylvania, New Jersey, up into New York a good bit, and then eventually get assigned south in 1779. Come down just a little bit too late to actually do a much great service in the fall of Charleston. They're riding all around Charleston as the British take Charleston, and as they move into South Carolina, the British are able to push the Dragoons, the Cavalry, back into North Carolina, make them have to re-equip themselves. By the time of Cowpens, this group of soldiers had been tried and tested for many years. Most of them were meant to be serving for 3 years or the duration of the war, and had seen a lot of service. They were veteran soldiers, and they were being paid by Congress, or not paid by Congress, however you want to talk about it. But they were contracted as real career soldiers in that sense. The horses underneath them were part of the Continental Line as well. They were government property. They were being purchased up by horse breeders, private citizens, whoever had an available mount, being trained and disciplined in the cavalry service, and then assigned to the duties of the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons. These soldiers become partners with these horses, and their integral relationship will allow them to perform effective maneuvers in the battlefield. What I hold in my hand, what my comrades hold in their hands, is essentially a 3-foot-long steel whip, the essential and most destructive weapon of the cavalry, the saber. This one that I hold represents one that was probably made around Fredericksburg, Virginia, out of the Rappahannock Forge Ironworks. The same place, essentially, where our commander, Lieutenant Colonel William Washington, was born and raised. Now, this saber, being a 3-foot-long steel whip, is going to be the most essential weapon, because along with the momentum and power that we have in our horses, riding at speed 20 or 30 miles per hour, as fast as you can, 4 men abreast, 80 men deep. These horses are going to act like a unstoppable column coming into whatever enemy is in front of us. Now here at the Battle of Cowpens, that means they're coming into contact with both infantry soldiers, just like you are on the ground, as well as other mounted troopers. On the far left of this line, we have the British representation of the cavalry arm on that side of the field. The rebel army has the Continental Light Dragoons, some state militia dragoons, and then the British military has trained professional British soldiers, as you see in the red coat here, the British 17th Light Dragoons that were assigned to take command with the British Legion Dragoons, which were Americans who joined up to fight for the British, mostly raised out of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, who come and serve south here, here at the Battle of Cowpens. They work the same way, they're trained the same way, they're disciplined and outfitted the same way, and they do a lot of destructive damage as the Southern campaign unfolds from 1779 until 1781, when these troops are captured at the Battle of Yorktown in Virginia. But here at the Battle of Cowpens, these soldiers are going to play an important role in driving back that American line. If you've taken the battlefield tour, if you've seen the video in the visitor center, you know that Daniel Morgan arrayed his men in a series of staged lines. And those infantrymen, those riflemen in those first two lines are going to be driven back by the 17th Light Dragoons and the British Legion Dragoons as they move forward and under command of Bannister Tarleton, the overall commander of that British Legion regiment. Now, they're going to be working the same way, but the cavalry arm is going to rely on that saber. They're also going to be equipped with pistols. Though less accurate, less reliable, and certainly less capable of fighting at a distance or making as much of an impact, it's one of the few instances that we have well documented here at the Battle of Cowpens where pistols really come in handy. Something that's not very accurate, I couldn't guarantee that I could hit that tree over there, is something that's going to get you out of the toughest scrape you have. At the very tail end of the Battle of Cowpens, Bannister Tarleton is being run down by the American commander, Lieutenant Colonel William Washington. And as they engage with sabers, it's believed that Tarleton, or a British officer in this duel, his sword breaks at the hilt. Now, the one weapon that's always loaded has just broken and failed you. He's able to turn his horse quickly. He pulls out his pistol, aims it, and fires, killing or injuring to the point where William Washington's horse is taken out of the battle. He's no longer able to pursue with whatever British officer who he thinks is Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton as they leave the battlefield. This saves Tarleton's capacity to retire and ride miles and miles and miles under pursuit of the American line. Now, these men are going to show you a little bit about what happens when you drill and maneuver with these American or these horses. And we're going to show you how these troops move as a unit, cohesively, hopefully. And we're going to give you an example of how these troops move around the battlefield. The hat specifically, yeah. So this helmet, which we're all wearing helmets except for the man on the far end, who by the color of your horse can tell comes from this part of the country, is dressed as a mounted militiaman, but we're all wearing helmets. And these helmets are made in different fashions to denote the regimental distinctions that we have in the service. So this man on the end is a man of the 17th Light Dragoon. Light Dragoons, a British regiment. Their uniform specifications for this time period call for a leather hat with a front metal shield that is japanned with the skull and crossbones embossed into that, pressed into it. That's a regimental marking that denotes them from all the British regiments. No other British Light Dragoon regiment is going to have that distinction. When you see him across the battlefield, you know exactly who he is and what his rank is based on his uniform distinctions. Likewise, the man next to him is part of a provincial unit that has similarly a leather helmet with a bearskin crest on top, which is a fashionable and defensive crest against saber blows. It's going to show what unit he's a part of. The 3rd Light Dragoons has a leather helmet with metal chains, a crest with white horsehair, and a turban around it with a visor. All of these small distinctions will go into military regulations and dress, just like you would see in the modern military, with the minutest details telling you whether this person is legit or not, who they are, where they serve, and what distinctions they have. Yeah?
Calvary saber training
Again, that's one of those training practices that happens in the service. We don't have great documentation on how much saber training you're getting as part of your initial training as a dragoon. But essentially, you need to be able to carry, come down to your sword. It's not that complicated. The main thing you want to worry about is coming forward with your saber. Because if I miss whatever I'm aiming at here, I go past, I hit my sword, my horse in the head. You don't want to have that happen. So most people are going to be trained to be able to rise up in the stirrups and come down with as much force as possible with that cutting weapon. The sword manuals that come about after the American Revolution will start to change some of the ways in which you're training soldiers, showing diagrams for guarding your face, guarding your shoulders, your back, and being able to go into charges with the point up elevated, which is not something that seems to be very common in the Revolutionary War. One of the participants here at the Battle of Cowpens, right before the battle ensues, he's out scouting for Charleston's men. He's a member of the mounted rebel cavalry. He survives, thankfully, to tell his tale. But he comes upon a group of 17th Light Dragoons who see him and a small number of men out scouting. They bear down on them with swords raised faster than he can get away. His 2 compatriots are able to kind of run off, but he is bared down by 4 troopers of the 17th Light Dragoons. He's able to parry one blow, blocks another. As soon as these people are coming on both sides of him, he's hit the back of the head. He's hit the shoulder. And then he has gone down like this. He's kind of knocked unaware. The next thing he hears or feels is a saber come across his forehead. The next thing he notices is that blood is streaming down his face to the point where he can't see. And he's being attacked at that point while he's blinded by his own blood by these 4 men on horseback. He's eventually thrown from his horse, dragged in front of Tarleton and interrogated about what the American line is situated at. He's given surgical treatment there, survives to tell his tale, and gives us an account of his experience during the Battle of Cowpens. But it's not uncommon to see during cavalry maneuvers this kind of dramatic saber-to-saber combat that maybe not kills you, but disorients you, breaks bones, gives you lacerations that last a lifetime, concussions, knocks you from a horse. We have a local militiaman like the man that's on the far end of the line there represents, who talks about bringing a farm horse from home, and as he sees one of the 17th Light Dragoons horses without a rider on, he says he never made a dismount and remount so fast in his life. Because those 17th Light Dragoons and the British Legion Dragoons had collected horses, prime thoroughbred horse flesh from the Low Country out of rice plantations, and brought them up through the ensuing years as they captured Charleston. So he was on a way better, faster horse, and he wanted to make sure he got the best mount underneath him. He jumps off. Any other questions? Yeah.
How old are the soldiers?
That's a great question. How old are the soldiers? How old are you?
6.
6. You got it probably about 10 years. So you could get by lying about your age if you're stout and grown, if you're like 12, 13, if you're able to ride a horse and carry a saber, you might be able to get into the service. But by regulations, we're supposed to take you at 16 to 60. So that's a pretty wide age range. The majority of the forces on the rebel side are going to probably average out about 18 to 24 years of age. Most wars are fought by the young of their nation. It's a young man's game, and it's a burden that a government or a people will shoulder upon the men who are the youngest and the fittest, typically. That being said, if you're not capable of wielding a weapon like this, it doesn't mean you don't have a place in the ranks. Many young people are put to work as assistants or aides to an officer or as a musician. One thing we don't have out here in front of you is how we would typically communicate if we were a large group, which is by trumpet. A natural trumpet horn, which is pretty long. It's about the length of this saber blade, which will give you all of the blows through musical commands of all the things that I was saying out there, telling the horses what to do, how to charge, how to get up and go to work, how to take your horses to get water. All those things are going to be done by musical instrumentation. And that might be something that a person who's a little younger might be able to do in the service. There's a great example of somebody who's young working as an aide or a waiter to Lieutenant Colonel William Washington, the rebel commander here, who's able to come up and take his pistol. He was armed with a pistol like this one and shoot at one of the British horses that was happening right at the end of the battle here. They were engaging in a saber, one-on-one fight, and this young person comes up and is able to shoot his pistol and ward off one of the opposing attackers against his commander. Actually saves his life. So they're not inconsequential service there for young people. But I would, count your graces that you've got probably 10 years before you get enlisted into the troops. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
With the higher rate of mobility and speed that the mounted infantry and the cavalry have, did they also have camp followers and camp women?
It's a great question. We don't have very good records for the 3rd Light Dragoons about how many camp followers they were allowed. Likely, if they do have them, they're keeping up with the baggage wagons, which are following along behind whatever column of Light Dragoons are outpacing them. But they do have baggage wagons. They'll be bringing essential items like foodstuffs, extra ammunition, sabers, and also a string of horses that would be maintained, if they were sick or injured, lame. So theoretically, yes, but we don't have great records. We'll be able to work as that united column that's going to make such an impact on whatever enemy force that you are facing. Dragoons, attention. Files right. March. Right, 2, rank up. Form, single rank higher. March. Take ground to the left. March. Right. March. Take ground to the right. March. Front. Trot. March. Right field. March. Stretch your line. Take care. Halt. Drift. Files right. March. Form, single rank guitar. Halt. Take your So, within that small amount of maneuvering, you were able to see us weave our way as a unit in and out of obstacles, moving around, operating essentially like doors, swinging on a hinge to effectively keep our order and discipline as we moved around and navigated the battlefield. This is going to be essential in any kind of combat scenario. The best drilled, the best disciplined horse soldiers will often be the ones that come out victorious. simply because they can go through an enemy troop and they can reform the fastest, they can get out of harm's way, and they can be ready to strike and fight again. Now, we came up to you at a trot. That is not the fastest we can go. They're pretty orderly at that point, and we're not even that many soldiers. Can I have a show of hands of honesty who was considering having to move out of the way? The whole front line, right? This is what you're staring down at if you are a combatant here on the Cowpens battlefield. On both sides, you're going to see cavalry attacking infantry. What do infantry have against cavalry? Any ideas?
Bayonets.
A bayonet, if you've got a bayonet. Who are on the first two lines at Cowpens on the rebel side?
Militia.
Militia with rifles who don't have bayonets. What's your option?
Run.
Run. That is the best option, and that's the right option, and that's exactly what they do. Those soldiers will run for their lives, and as those soldiers run for their lives, they're running back to horses here so they can get back on them and skedaddle even faster. But the American rebel dragoons are able to come in and save those soldiers, hiding on the flanks, always looking for targets of opportunity, options that allow for a vulnerability to be exploited on either side. And you'll see some pretty harrowing accounts if you read the books about the Battle of Cowpens, if you watch the park videos and talk to the park rangers on their tours about this. We represent those soldiers here, and I'm happy to turn it over to you to lead this discussion as we have a Q&A, basically, as long as you want. Is there anything you want to ask about? Yes, sir.
What's the difference in the cavalry and the dragoons?
Cavalry and dragoons are essentially synonyms. A dragoon comes from a old French word for the type of light carbine that dragoon regiments would have been issued. So dragoons technically are mounted infantry that could get down off their horses and fight as infantry with somebody holding their horses in readiness. True cavalry or heavy cavalry, a lot of times are soldiers that are meant solely to be fighting from horseback. But the light dragoons, meaning essentially that you're lightly equipped, you're meant to be able to move quickly around the countryside, are going to be able to do both services. In the American theater of war, in the Revolutionary War, it's very rare to see most of those soldiers equipped with carbines or short muskets that they're going to fire from horseback or from on ground. There's problems with equipping them, shortages of supply, and they're just not that effective. So the thing that most of those American commanders are telling the soldiers to worry about is that saber, which is always loaded and always reliable. And no matter if you're cavalry or a dragoon, you're going to see somebody with a saber. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How much training would a horse and rider, or just the horse and rider, are they mated up for training and they stick together? How does that look?
So the question is about training the horse and rider. Ideally, you would like that horse and the rider to become a pair, but they are both in a combatant situation. And this is a period of time where this is a beast of burden. This horse is going to be driven into the ground if it's necessary for the service. The manuals of the time talk about inculcating a great relationship between horse and rider because ultimately it means that the horse gets taken care of better and you get a better relationship. It's going to be really important that you're going to be able to communicate well. But it is a tool of the military service. And the horses will sustain injuries, they'll get sick, they get lame, and so you might have to go through several horses in your service. You'd hope not. The training you would get would be based on your circumstances. In war, ideals and plans are out the window. You have horse purchasers going around county to county in Virginia and North Carolina, purchasing up however many horses they're told to. Those horses are then brought to a depot where riding masters are then going to instruct those horses on what it means to be ridden, backed, get them to the point where they know how to be ridden. And then in the service, you're probably going to see a lot of the day-to-day training that's going to have to happen as far as getting them used to sabers swashing around their heads, drums and flags, and the battlefield noises. You're going to use and rely a lot on the herd instinct to where if you have horses that are capable of withstanding that or capable of working as a unit, they're not as liable to panic and scatter. They're going to stay as a cohesive herd. But you can only rely on that to a certain degree, because they're also prey animals. They're not meant to run into a group of people with bayonets. So there's some things that you have to overcome. But there's a good amount of training that happens in the field, but you're going to train your horses to ride. You're going to train your riders to ride. We can take somebody out of the field right here. If you've never ridden before, we can get you riding and working as a dragoon within the week. The horse could have never been backed and ridden. You're going to be working that horse, making it pay for itself within 3 or 4 days. It's how fast you can get it done. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Why does this gentleman on the end have a different hat?
He's part of a different regiment. So the question is about the uniform. Any other question? Yeah. Go ahead.
How often do y'all get together to train your horses together?
Not often enough. Not enough. Yeah.
Got it good.
Back in the day, we used to get together once a month, but nowadays it's typically every time we get to an event, which happens maybe 5 or 6 times a year.
Gas isn't cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your question?
I noticed you got 2 holsters.
Yeah.
Did every dragoon have 2 pistols, or just the officers?
No, that's a great question. Actually, with the lack of available equipment, many dragoons went without pistols at all. And again, you don't have to rely on them. So if you don't have pistols, fine. As long as you've got a sword, you're good to go. So you might have 1 pistol, you might have 0. Holsters can be used for other things. There's regimental history for the British Light Dragoon soldiers actually carrying bread and cheese in one of their holsters for rote food and nourishment, and the other one has a pistol in it. Some of these cavalry regiments are actually by design meant to have 1 holster, and then the other one would have been actually not a holster but something similar, a pocket meant for carrying horseshoes and nails, for being able to retread your horses, reshoot them. Yeah. You have to kind of think of it like going cross country on a motorcycle. You have to carry everything you need to go to live on your back and care for your horse, and so you have to become capable of being light and efficient in that way. Yeah. It's hard to say. The record keeping for the American side is pretty haphazard or criticized and exaggerated and everything. But there's probably about 80, 90 American dragoons like undressed, and then you've got probably a like number in as militia dragoons, calls, light dragoons, that you see this gentleman on the end of the and you've got numbers of those things.
My question is, do we have any accounts of what the battlefield conditions were that day? Were they wet? Were they ice?
1780, because we're January of 81, but 1780 was a very rainy year. We do know that.
Any other questions?
She's talking about the roads, the weather, ground conditions.
Just hold that thought 1 second.
Yep.
How long are they trained?
How long are they trained? As long as they need to. If you can get it done in 3 days, good. If it takes you a month, do it. But they've got to start working for you pretty fast. You don't have time enough to let these horses sit for 3 months before they take the field. So you might corral them up, send them to a riding center that's essentially a corral, and you get them going, and then it's up to the riders and the riding masters that are part of the unit to train them on the go. You're going to get a lot of experience just by doing. Yeah. Your question was about conditions during the battle?
The field conditions, yeah.
So it seems to have been cold, but not so cold that it wasn't humid. So we see accounts from as the battle was underway, there's a kind of a mist in the air, which means it couldn't be so cold that you don't have humidity. But prior to that battle, there have been tremendous rains, which have been hampering the British advance. The British Legion and 17th Light Dragoons, along with the infantry under Tarleton, had made a forced march from basically the south side of Spartanburg County all the way up to here to engage in this battle. They've been pursuing Morgan. They're going to push him to the point where he has to fight. The Americans on the other side, or the rebel Americans on this side, have been sitting here for a little bit. So they're going through mud and swamps. They're not eating. They've gone through their food. They haven't eaten for like 24 hours. So bad conditions, but not to the point where you couldn't see, not torrential rain, doesn't seem like there was any snow on the ground. Footing here seems to be good enough to pick out. Any other questions?
Yeah, so what overall percentage did the cavalry make up of the the total army?
I don't know. A small percentage. Overall of Washington's army, minuscule. Compared to the infantry. British likewise. I mean, the cavalry is being used in America in major battles like this one, but proportionally to the rest of the military, it's very small.
They're very expensive to outfit, right? I mean, the saddles, the equipage, but they never had enough.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have the same numbers that you're going to see in the Napoleonic Wars or the Civil War. The percentages of cavalry versus infantry versus artillery, you're going to see way more infantry than cavalry. They're not what you're relying on. Yeah.
Would you agree that here it was roughly 10% of the force, though? It's a fairly substantial number here, right?
Yeah, I don't know how to put it in percentages. We could do number breakdowns though, but I mean, it's hard to tell exactly, but from battle to battle it changes. Yeah.
Does the blonde hair on top signify also where you are from?
Yeah, absolutely. So it tells you what regiment I'm part of. If I had black horsehair, or red horsehair, or brown horsehair, or green horsehair, it might tell you what regiment I'm from. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did they see action up in Saratoga?
No. So Saratoga has a little bit of cavalry, but most of that battle is infantry and artillery. There's actually American cavalry or rebel cavalry that comes over from Connecticut that are sent home in the Saratoga campaign. This unit sees service as far north as probably around New York City, Westchester County. And then they get hit really hard in a nighttime attack by a British regiment, British Light Infantry in 1778 in September. And they get annihilated. They call it a massacre, but it's not really a massacre, but it's a huge upset for this regiment. And as the battle and the whole war shifts south, this unit regroups and then moves south under orders. Yeah.
Watching your horse claw the ground, what's that all about?
Anxiety. She's anxious. Well, not anxiety. She's restless. She would like to be doing something else. It's like, I'm standing still here. Let's do something. But
boring.
She's got some nervous energy. Any other questions? Well, we're going to be camped right there, so if you have further questions or want to talk to us about anything, see anything up close and personal, we're happy to discuss things with you. I thank you very much for coming to the park today.
Thank you.
I wish you the best of your knowledge.